Never really tried to explain it except of late. It just pours out. And it's like I call it winning the lottery. I don't have any control over it. Some days I wake up and I have to just grab something and start writing, or my computer. And this first piece that I'm going to read you happened like that. It started at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the 27th of January, and I ended, the 26th, and I finished it midnight, the stroke of midnight on the 27th. But it just came out. That's how I write. I'd like to be one of those people. I do it twice a week. I'm gonna, and I just can't. Yeah. What about you?
Until recently, that was the way that I also did it. I had to wait for the lightning to strike, right?
Thank you, the lightning.
And so I was talked into joining this daily write group, and where you get prompts, right? And you have to write a poem every day with the day's prompt.
I think I like that. I mean, the prompts.
I fulfill the task, but I can't really say that's a good poem. I mean,
you were just following.
I did my best. It didn't really, hit with me. But if the prompt does hit with me, then I can write something good.
Yes, and that's exactly what happened to me. Did you feel the earthquakes we had the other night?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what happened. That's how this went. It's called Portrait of My Los Angeles. It started with the earthquake, because then I was thinking, I had all these thoughts about it because it was in January, and then the 94 earthquake was in January. And then I'm like, why are earthquakes in January?
Martin Luther King Day, that was the 94 earthquake.
And exactly, but remember was it 71 earthquake?
Yeah,
that was
71,
February, like February 9 maybe?
Yeah, that was the Sylmar quake.
Yeah, I lived in Pacoima. I was.
So you were really close to the epicenter.
I was close, and because I've experienced so many earthquakes, I'm not afraid of them. I mean, I should be, but nothing bad has ever happened around me. But so I started thinking about, I kind of love what they call earthquake weather, because usually they say, it's earthquake weather. And every time someone says it, I'm like, it feels like the Santa Ana winds. I really like this weather. And so I started thinking about that, and then I started collectively thinking about the earthquakes, and then this happened. It just flew out of me. It has nothing to do with earthquakes, but that's how it happened. It was just a spark. I like that you say, light when lightning strikes. It's great. And I mean, is that what happened with the book?
Well,
the Forbidden Lunchbox?
And I didn't sit down and say, today I have to write a poem. None of them came from that.
Right.
And I can't really do that. I mean, I always carry this notebook.
Smart.
Right? And the notebook, basically, I write whatever is happening. Like I'm waiting at the bus stop, or I'm sitting down someplace, and I write in it. And then sometimes I do come up with a poem, and I write it in this book. But let's hear what you
want to hear it? Okay, but I have one quick question about your journal. Has it paid off for you? Like, are there things that you've put in it, and then later you looked at it and went, oh, I gotta write about that, and then it turns into like a piece or a story?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
I like hearing that. Okay, so I don't know if you're like this, but I'm excited if I write something new. I want to read it to other people. I want to hear their reaction, but I want to hear myself read it, because that helps. That's my editing process. Is that yours?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and even when I'm working with writers on the press, I mean, you and I didn't get to do this because your stuff was already written, but like, say for instance, Jack Grisham or Pleasant Gaiman or even Essay, I'll just say, read it out loud to me, and so you can hear yourself. Usually at the end of the day, I mean, I know it's for the page, but it's also for us to be, when we read it out loud to an audience, that's kind of the end result.
Sure.
So, okay, so here goes. Portrait of My Los Angeles. It's the earthquake weather in me. It's my love for palm trees and the way they line certain streets. My love for supermarkets with their big empty parking lots. It's taking long drives through various canyons. It's being in love with certain silhouettes and views of trees and telephone poles as the sun is setting, because I've seen them all my life and they're embedded in my soul. It's having love for certain streets because they have no sidewalks. It's my ability to love the ocean only through a restaurant window, but disliking it with its direct sun if asked to lay in it, scantily clad for more than 2 minutes. It's my love for the stars, the ones in the sky and on sidewalks. It's growing up with an empty backyard and having to drive far to visit friends and family. It's only knowing the changing seasons by what's on display on the shelves at the supermarkets. It's having to drive everywhere just to get anywhere. It's being bummed when it rains even though there's a drought. It's talking on the phone with friends more than seeing them in person. It's my love for the beach, but rarely seeing it. It's being guilty of saying, it's hot, but it's a dry heat. It's refusing to go somewhere because I probably won't find a place to park, and yet there's parking lots everywhere. It's all the famous streets and boulevards with their incredible history. It's many different cultures and subcultures and cults. It's the place where people come to be somebody. It's definitely a love-hate thing. Sometimes it's like the greatest drug and the best place on earth. And other times it's like telling someone you love them and they don't say it back. But it's my home. I was born here. I can't imagine living anywhere else. I can't imagine leaving Los Angeles.
That's great. The poem itself is like a synecdoche of all of Los Angeles, you can see all of the different spaces in Los Angeles, from the beach to the valley,
right,
and elsewhere, are in that poem. So that's for me, you know, it's a kind of poem that I would read again, because there's always something good in. The best poetry is a poetry that you go back to and you read again.
Absolutely.
You want to hear it again. There are other things in it. I mean, to me, for me, poetry is not. For the poet, yes, I've written the poem, it's finished, here it is.
Right.
But for me, the reader, when I read it, I'm putting something into it and I'm taking something out of it at the same time.
Right.
And I'm putting, I mean, these things are like triggers for me, like vast empty parking lots. I thought of the J.G. Ballard quote.
Right.
All the whole, I have the very same feeling about the beach as you do. I don't want to go out in the sun and get burned.
But it's great through a restaurant window. It's my favorite way to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm, mine too.
Yeah.
So I see that, and you know, as also being a native Angelino, I get all of this. But I think that somebody that lives in Tokyo, Japan, reading it, they would get a taste of what Los Angeles is like.
Right. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully it can transcend. But for me, it's like, you know, and growing up with an empty backyard where you could have friends over or relatives. I think that was the plan, is to have friends and family over, but yet driving far to see my grandma, you know, or driving far to see friends. Like, the backyard was always empty, you know? But for me, my favorite line in there, and it has no bearing to anything at all, is loving certain streets because they have no sidewalks. And I mean, I figured out why I love them, because they're not tract homes.
Yeah.
So all the homes are really different, and there's just something kind of fairy tale-ish about it. Like, it's just not, like the planned neighborhoods. Although I do love things about suburbia, and I don't know if you're like me, but growing up in the valley, which is where I grew up, I spent my life thinking I needed to get out. If I really wanted to have a creative experience, if I really wanted to grow and get the most out of being a creative person and find my voice, I needed to get out of the valley. That's what I thought. But it was wrong. I mean, did I have a lot of great experiences in living in Hollywood? Absolutely. But I think I can be anywhere, really. I mean, did you kind of have that experience?
Well, I also grew up in the valley.
Yeah, which is amazing.
My reason for wanting to leave the valley, which I could do when I was able to go away to college.
How old were you?
I was 18.
Okay, that makes sense.
And it was to take myself out of the surveillance of my parents, basically.
Exactly.
So I could smoke weed without fear. And,
but they're gonna walk in.
Yeah, and you know, I could have girls over sitting on the bed with me.
Yes.
And not have. What are you doing in there?
Knock, knock,
nothing,
knock.
nothing.
Yeah, knock, knock, knock.
So that was my reason.
Where in the valley did you grow up?
So we lived in North Hollywood. We lived in Van Nuys. We lived in Studio City.
Great.
Sherman Oaks.
Where was the first place you went when you left home?
Honolulu.
Oh.
I went to the University of Hawaii.
Whoa. Really? And you, okay, so was that on purpose?
That was on purpose.
Because?
Well, my parents weren't going to be taking jet plane flights to Honolulu to check up on
The
me.
farthest spot possible.
Yes.
But no, but there must have been more to it. I mean,
Well, I mean, at the time, I wanted to major in anthropology, Pacific anthropology in particular, because at the time I read this book by Aldous Huxley called Island,
oh.
which described a sort of a hippie utopia. I was really into this, Iris. I mean, I thought
What year was this?
This was 1969.
Oh, wow. Okay, a lot was going on then.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
So-
war ended.
The war didn't end yet. And
It
the war
didn't end,
ended
was it
in
72?
72 it ended.
Oh,
It
okay,
was still
so
going on.
Well, we had Manson in 69.
Yeah, Manson
Okay.
was 60.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
So and I was, I was in Honolulu reading about it,
Oh, got it.
reading about Woodstock,
Right.
which
Sorry.
was I arrived there in August 69, and of course the Woodstock Music Festival was August of 69. So, I read about it, and I read about what was happening in Los Angeles and everything.
Oh, wow.
And then when I came back for a Christmas vacation to Los Angeles that December, my hair had grown longer, I had a beard, I was tanned, and my father said, "Shave the beard. You look just like Charles Manson."
I remember being 12 years old and being in Griffith Park and like seeing a trolley go by or one of those and jumping on it with a bunch of people. They're like, come on, like a bunch of hippies. And then it taking us to
The
11.
Love-In, yes. Well,
I was 12.
The Love-In was every Sunday. They
Yeah.
had
That time, we'll never get that time back in Los Angeles. I mean, that was a beautiful time.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. Eventually, I wound up in New York City. And,
Right.
And this was in the 70s. So it's like it's a later coming of age for me. Let me see if I can find that one.
70, what, 4? maybe?
74, exactly.
We're connected.
After discovering the Beat Generation, Bob Dylan, free jazz, and revolutionary politics at age 16, there was no turning back. But I didn't land in New York City's Lower East Side until I was in my 20s. Then home to La Mama, the New Eurekan Poets Cafe, the Grassroots Tavern, the Socialist Workers' Party headquarters, 339 Lafayette Street, where the Congress of Racial Equality, the War Resisters League, the Socialist Party, and the Free Association were housed under one roof, and the New York City General Membership Branch of the IWW at 119 East 10th Street, a couple of doors from St. Mark's and the Bowery, and the Poetry Project. Though told that the Lower East Side was in an advanced state of disintegration, it was so much livelier than anything I had known before that I found it hard to imagine how it could have been better, even though the neighborhood was hard hit by crime. I had the unparalleled experience of community life on the Lower East Side, the closest thing to anarchy it has ever been my pleasure to enjoy. Despite battles with landlords, harassment by cops and muggers, the artists there who lived there and their allies, old-time Bowery bums, prostitutes, drug addicts, winos, gays and lesbians, and other outcasts, maintain a vital community based on mutual aid, and in which being different was an asset rather than a liability. For many of the races and ethnicities there, the practice of solidarity and equality was second nature. Almost everyone was poor, but no one went hungry, and newcomers had no trouble finding a place to stay. In the Lower East Side of the 1970s, what mattered most was poetry, freedom, creativity, and having a good time. To paraphrase an old aristocrat, those who did not live before the gentrification will never know how sweet life was.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. You can't live in Hollywood or anywhere in New York and be a starving artist now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, well, I personally, I watched the transformations of Hollywood over the years.
Heartbreaking.
And personally, I liked it best when it was run down.
Same, yeah. Yeah, and you could live in a storefront or, an old Hollywood beautiful old Hollywood like apartment with a view of the city. I mean, I had a place above Cherokee, above the boulevard. It had the view of the whole city. It was $275 a month with utilities.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it had a lot of cockroaches, but it was an old.
So did my place.
I mean, we accepted each other kind of thing, but it was, you know, it was stunning, and I didn't know at the time that I would never get to do that again.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know, I think these experiences, these urban experiences, seeing street life and responding to street life without any prejudice. I mean, the typical, the middle class filter for street life. Oh, keep away. Oh, that's scary. I don't like that.
And we know them by, you know, we're on a first name basis with them, and you know, keep an eye on my car or whatever, my cat or whatever. Yeah. No, I mean, that was a real beautiful community experience.
If you want to put us in a lineage, and I think it could be done.
Right.
We go back to Francois Villon.
Wow.
Who was the French poet of the streets.
Right.
It was during the period of the novel of The Hunchback of Notre Dame happened during that period. That was set during that period.
Wow.
So, I mean, and Villon was a street poet, and his work survived and was preserved. And at least in the Western poetic tradition, that I would say is the you know, our great ancestor of poets who came from the streets. Or when I say came from the streets, they don't have to literally come from the streets.
Right.
But the streets as a subject of poetry are as worthy as any other subject.
Absolutely.
And if you spend time on the streets with people that are street people, basically the marginalized people, the outcast people, those people accept you, and they accept you as an artist. You don't have to prove to them that you're an artist. They accept you as you are, the way you accept them as they are.
Right.
And so you get this kind of synergy. I mean, even if they can't articulate their own lives, we can be their bards, writing about them, writing about what we experienced there ourselves.
Which is what Damon Runyon did.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you know, and that is clearly and definitely a part of your work.
In the Shadow of the Hollywood Sign. In 1982, the streets of Hollywood were vacant and barren, a ghost town, like the abandoned movie set that it was. No tourists, no glamour, just a has-been stretch of a boulevard with tarnished and littered stars on a sidewalk of Babylon dreams, inhabited by the homeless, leftover Hollywood hopefuls, pushing shopping carts, talking about Frank Sinatra and Lana Turner, still waiting to get discovered. And a bunch of us punk rock kids from broken homes or no homes trying to figure it all out, running wild in the abandoned streets and having the time of our lives. It felt very pre-apocalyptic. We were all waiting for the world to end in 1984. With 2 years left to go, there was no time to waste. The world did end in 1984, but not in the way Orwell predicted. He was about 4 decades off. It ended for us in Los Angeles by having the 1984 Olympics here. People from all over the world attended the festivities and realized all the opportunity, a whole new kind of gold rush. They came back and turned Los Angeles into a city that I no longer recognize. No longer the city where I could feel the majestic spirits of so many eras, the 1970s and the politically rebellious rock and roll spirit of the 1960s on the Sunset Strip, or the glamorous and corruption of the 1950s, and the roar of the new Hollywood in the 1920s on Hollywood Boulevard. Even though Hollywood Boulevard was abandoned in 1982, there were still leftover remnants from the celebrations. All the old ghosts and some of the old haunts were still here, and I was in love with it all.
There was this woman named Zoe Tamerlis, and Zoe Tamerlis was a denizen of the Lower East Side. She was a playwright, actress, and she used to hang out in anarchist circles, which is where I first met her. But later on, she made a movie called Ms. 45.
Oh, yeah.
And when I knew her in anarchist circles, her hair was dyed black, but she was really blonde. Years later, I saw her in The Bad Lieutenant.
Oh.
Which she co-wrote. She co-wrote the screenplay.
That's a great movie.
Yeah, and she's in it. But when I knew her on the Lower East Side, you know, she was sort of like, you know, very charismatic, and she always had interesting things to say, and she would read parts of her one-act plays to us.
Wow.
All of the men were like, Zoe, we want to see Zoe. When is Zoe coming? We want to see Zoe. I mean, maybe she's going to favor us. Poem for Zoe Tamerlis. Cats leap across my heart when I see your full red lips, and the glassy water breaks with white sparks, scattering your words in all directions. Zoe, your crowned scalp with inky black hair, a halo of dawn over the urban river's skyline. Tonight, you see through my words, Zoe of twilight ruby, and I sleep through your breath. Zoe of black leather, I dream through your tattooed arms. Zoe of a desert, where the hawks turn blue, and I walk in your palm of Mount Mevru. Zoe of obsidian in the coup d'etat, and I'm lost in your solar breast, the flares made fertile. Zoe in the night of honeysuckle, Zoe of crystal palace, Zoe of Mongolian steppes covered with gold Krugerrands, Zoe of boots under a red brick tenement where anarchists are plotting our liberation. Zoe of dolphin spume, Zoe of lava made helium, Zoe.
That's beautiful. Very well. I get it. I feel her. Yeah. Did she ever hear that?
No, she never heard that. I mean, this was much later when I was going through old journals, and I said, whatever happened to Zoe? I looked her up, and she died in Paris.
Oh, wow. Well, at least it was in Paris. It's interesting how we are affected by the other people, the other creatives and the other, I have, when I read my next one, it's about Darby Crash. I wrote a little piece about him, the ghost of punk rock past. The first time we met was on a Saturday night in 1978 or 79. He was running down Sunset Boulevard with about 5 other people. They were all covered in peanut butter. He stopped right in front of me and sweetly said, "We're smearing peanut butter all over ourselves. You want to do it with us?" My friends were horrified and pulled me away. I was intrigued. About a year later, we were in his apartment on Cherimoya and Franklin, which was literally in the shadow of the Hollywood sign. There was about 10 kittens running around and bouncing off the walls. It was a flying cat circus. He liked to say my name backwards. "Hey Siri, give me your arm." And before I knew it, he grabbed my wrist, and just as his lit cigarette was about to hit my skin, one of the kittens flew into us and knocked it out of his hands. The last time I saw him was at Okie Dog. It was about 2:30 in the morning. He was walking around saying goodbye to people, one by one. And the next day, just like that, he was gone. Since then, there's been so many others, and I think about it, these encounters, brief and fleeting and otherwise. These bonds, surreal and otherworldly, in life as in death. These chance meetings, and I don't know what any of it means. I'm just glad we met along the way.
It's a beautiful tribute, and what's really good about it is there is no sentimentality. It's what really happened.
Yes, exactly.
It's what really happened, and it's also from the heart. So I mean, I think that taking our sensibility from the streets, both of us.
Right.
You can see that there is a range of ways of writing poetry, even though we share that same sensibility. So it's not like, street poetry, it's all about one little narrow thing. It's not.
No.
And, if we go back, and I'm sure that we can connect a lineage from Villon down to the present.
Yes.
Including ourselves and others.
Yeah.
I find all of those other marginal poets, street poets, poets that talked in the language of the people at that particular moment in history.
Right.
So, and I think that that is one of the many streams of poetry that we have.
And I feel blessed that we got to be a part of it.
Me too. And I think it's going to last. It's going to go on, because you're always going to have people that exist outside of formal structures, outside of the academy, people that are drawn to poetry as a way of making sense of their lives.
Right.
And if they stick with it, they will learn. They will get better at it, and they will be able to express themselves and share what they have experienced with other people, and in such a way that those people can resonate with these experiences, because they are human experiences, even though they happen in this specific context, under these particular circumstances, at that particular time. It's like a record of a moment in time, a moment in culture, but at the same time it lives on and it goes back to earlier times.
It's like an echo chamber almost.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we need that human connection now more than ever.
Exactly. Sure.
Yeah.
We don't know. I mean, we're in almost the first quarter of the 21st century.
Right, almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a couple of more years, it'll be the first quarter of the 21st century, and so it's like sort of mind-blowing.
It is. But the human connection all the more, which is I'm so grateful that we got to do this today.
Me too.
Thank
Me
you.
too.
Thank you.
This is also an anniversary year because
Oh yeah.
Punk Hostage Press is 11 years old. Your press, which is actually a press devoted to this sensibility and this kind of poetry,
and this in our community, absolutely.
and with all of these volumes of people that might very well have not been preserved in the dignity of a printed book. It's hard to say what the significance of Punk Hostage Press will be in the future, but nonetheless, I believe it will have a place there because it preserved all of these voices that might otherwise have been forgotten or disappeared.
And how fitting that, your book has come out, and here we are in the 11th year, and because you were so crucial in helping us in the beginning. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Iris. It's been fun, huh?
It's been great.
Yeah.
So happy.
Cut!
Yeah.